First of all, I would like to thank you to Geshe and Bryce, not only giving me this opportunity, but giving us a science education since last more than a decade. And when Bryce asked me to give this presentation, I accepted immediately without asking what kind of topic that I should talk. This is not that because I have a lot of information to give you, but my aim to be here is mainly to encourage our monastic colleagues that to encourage you that you should be here. We have been joining the first science workshops. It was like a trail, and it's giving you an example. So you are I think, the real person who should be active on this road. So thank you very much. So today, I will be talking on sense organ, and then sense perception, and then sixth sense or mental perception. Since I myself have been interested in looking sense organ, which has been described by Basubandhu, and trying to find out some common field between scientific understanding. So that's what I would like to present to you. I'm going to be speaking on the first sense organ, biological and Buddhist concept of sense organ. And since in Buddhist texts we describe as a three condition to arise a sensory perception. So I will take these three conditions with the sense organ. And I'm not trying to create a common field, common understanding or common field, but trying to find out if there is a common ground where the different interpretations goes to. Then sense consciousness and the thalamus. From the neuroscientific point of view, the thalamus plays a very important role for the sensory perception. And then very brief on the object and subject. Then finally, this existence of sixth sense and some of the properties of the sixth sense. And then the question to the scientists and Buddhist scholars, which maybe comes from every topic. The sense, when we say sense organ and numbers of sense that believed by different schools or different understanding, of course, in Buddhism, we describe it as a sixth sense. And in general, five senses, I think everybody accepted, but on the sixth sense, there may have some different ideas or different way to believe. So when we talk about the sense, first of all, we ask, what is the sense? sense organ. I found from the scientists, they mainly speak as a receptor, not the organ. But in Buddhism, in Vaivashaka or Abhidharmakosha, we talk about the five senses. So what is the sense is, according to the Abhidharmakosha or in Buddhist, a very clear physical phenomena where all the sensory consciousness are relay on or dependent upon. And they talks about the sense organ of eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. So first I will go on the eye, like eye consciousness or this visual organ or sense organ. Actually, there are very complicated structures there, but I will mainly focusing on the retina. In the retina, there are many cells like photoreceptor, bipolar, and ganglion. And a brief information for the monastic colleagues, science described like light hits to the eye, passes through the pupil, and goes to the photoreceptor in retina, and then back to the bipolar, and then send it to the ganglion cell. And then ganglion cells send the information to the optic nerves, and then optic nerves take the information to LGN or lateral geniculate body or nucleus, and then send it to the visual cortex. And then from the visual cortex, it sends information to the different field, higher brain, wherever the information need to go. As I said, I'm going to focus on the retina or photoreceptor. In science, they describe two different types of cells in the retina, which they call rod and cone. As you can see here, this is the real picture of the rod and cone. Over here, the longer one is rod and the shorter one, this one is cone. In Buddhist text scripture like Abhidharmakosha and Abhidharma Sammuccaya, when they describe eye sense organ, Miki Wangbo, or they give you an example. It's like a sarma flower, sarme meadow, or in Abhidharmakosha, the eye organs remain surrounding by the eye like konyo nakbuchudu. I'm sorry, I don't know how do you call this in English, but sarma flower is a type of flower. Konyo nakbu is kind of pepper, one type of pepper. So what I'm interested is, what I found is this cone, the shape of the cone is very similar to the konyo nakbu. I've seen the konyo, it's a thin two tips and the middle is a little thicker. So I found this is very close shape to the konyo nakbu. And the rod, when they said sarma flower, I think it really doesn't mean the whole flower. It could be, we take this way, like it could be in the flower at the center where the seed lives. So there you can see some of this flower at the center, you can see it's like a rod shape. Why I'm saying this is, when we talk about the body organ or body sense organ, and in our text this is body sense organ is all over the body. But from neuroscientists' understanding, it is that the sensory field, of course, whole our body is covered by the sensory field, but whole our body is not the sensory receptor. So that's why we can take slight different way. And I think these are the, what I found this could be understood as a sense organ or eye sense, Mike Wangbo. So there's another, you can argue that in text, this is the sense organs are very hidden phenomena, which means that, which an ordinary being must definitely realize or initially independent upon sign of belief or dependent upon the scriptures. And one of my friend, even he argued me this, and then, well, we thought, of course, ordinary person or bare eye is impossible to see this rod and cone. But since we are, the scientists are looking at it with magnifying thousands of times, which make it able to see from your eye, but you are really not seeing with your bare eye. So this is one thing. Is there any problem to accept the rod and cone as an eye sense organ to our monastic friends? And then since the eye sense organ is a dominant condition of the eye consciousness, so I think it is easy to explain these three conditions through the eye, so I will go with this. I would like to talk about these three conditions. That what I think is a photoreceptor is a dominant condition, as I said. And now we move to the object condition we call Mikke. The Mikke should be like the one which produce or generate into the aspect of its own object, that the subjective which perceive the object, or in Tibetan we say Pumzi Mikshe Pumbe Namden Dukeba. If we take an example as an eye perception which perceive blue, so maybe we can say the one which produce or generate into the aspect of bluish, the eye which perceive blue. So here I think I have a very interesting information to our Buddhist colleagues, which is my experience during our science workshops. In 2009, the first leadership group prepared our exhibition. And just after the leadership workshop, we came to the Sera for the Emirate Tibet Science Initiative. While in this workshop, we have been preparing exhibition. And at that time, we have many Emirate students are there. So these Western students have been spread in different groups of exhibit. So in our group, we have 3 Emirate students, 2 girls and 1 boy. So they brought us a very new scientific finding information. When we were preparing, it's early June, but they gave us the information which was found in April 2009, so it's about 2 months behind. So that new scientific finding was, on a white sheet, write a letter A, big letter A. When you look at that letter, in your retina and lateral geniculate nucleus and also visual cortex, same shape of the neurons are active that they detected from the picture. So this was very interesting information to us when we say the object condition should be like a punzi mixture pambe namde dikyaba. The perception which sees the object, it's generate or into the aspect of that object. But then there could be arise a question that which part of the brain that the consciousness dependent or relay upon, like retina and LGN and visual cortex all have this informations. So I want you to decide which would be the best place or best idea. Then now immediate preceding condition. The immediate preceding condition is the one which produces the experience part of any mental phenomena. Maybe we can take an example of these kind of flowers. When we look at that flower, we can perceive or we can recognize it's a flower. But if somebody asks you, what kind of flower is this? Then I don't know what kind of flower is this, what you call this flower. So for that, we need another condition to recognize that flower. And if there is someone from botany, they may know what flower is this and the different flowers, they can separate this. So here I think we can understand that needed precision condition should be needed. And also one other example we can take is like when we look in the sky, we'll see the bunch of stars. But we don't have the condition in our mental field that we can separate, this is star, this is planet. It's a practical experience. When we were in Deer Park workshop, one night we went outside looking at the star with the Professor Chris, and he brought us the Galileo telescope, and we've been looking at that telescope. Of course, when we look in the sky, we see a bunch of stars, but we don't know what star is this and that. Then Professor Chris pointed us, this is Jupiter, that is like Mars, and then star constellation. So this is very obvious to us, even we are looking at the same place, but somebody can perceive what star is this, what planet is this, but some doesn't. But both in the visual retina, it's the same. The light receive information is receiving same thing. But the one can distinct, but another doesn't. So that is, I think, very important thing that really indicate the immediate preceding condition is very important. It's not only the visual, but what we hear, what we smell, where we touch, and all of these field, when the perception level comes, then the preceding condition, immediate preceding condition should be there. Without this condition, we will not be able to experience that part. And immediate preceding condition is uncommon properties of the mental field. Because in the physical phenomena, you don't need this immediate preceding condition. So now what you can argue is, you can argue eye direct perception, so eye consciousness. If eye consciousness need immediate preceding condition, even the immediate preceding condition itself is a mental phenomena. So it need another immediate preceding condition. So in this, I've heard one from one of the Mind in Life. His Holiness put this, he said that if we continually goes through finding immediate preceding condition, then finally it may touch to the very subtle mind, which is union with the very subtle wind energy, which is very common with all Buddhist school, but in Vajrayana, highest Yoga Tantra, they describe this. And also this could be a very good tools to find out life after death and the continuation of the consciousness. Because in this finding immediate precision, we don't need to go very deep down. We can do this kind of experiment where we can understand. I think even in the science, like when they try to find out speed of light, I don't think they've been trying to measure what would the light between there to here, like 10 meters. That is impossible to find out. So they will not try to do it. But they try to find out in the bigger field and apply this to the other phenomena. So as same as that way, the immediate condition, preceding condition, you can try to find out in this lifetime, and from maybe 10 years or 20 years, 50 years, which we can understand, maybe you can apply this to the other field, like just born baby or almost to death people's conscious too. So from here, the sound, like ear organ in Tibetan Buddhism, Abhidharma Kosha, it talks Dhokha Chuba, I think. So that's usually we take to the cochlea. But in the cochlea itself is not that much small. So maybe we think not really cochlea itself, but inside the cochlea we find a lot of hair cells, which is very, very small, where the vibration hit there and send the information to the nerves. So that's what we think, and we are not that much sure. But here, olfactory receptors, in Abhidharma Kosha, we told, says Sangha Mokap, it's a copper needle, and even they put the name as a negative, or which is very, very thin. So that we found in olfactory epithelium, there's a very tiny cilia where the smell buds are touched there and then sends information back to the olfactory bulb and nerve. So I think this is very obvious. And then taste. In our text, they says that Dawaka Patawu, it's covered with the moon. So of course, the sense taste receptors are not that big, but you can see from here, the taste pose goes from there and then feel like a round, which makes like, it's exactly like a Dawaka Patawu covered with the moon. So now to the touch. We differentiate many types of touch, and even here it is very obvious that there are receptors like pressure or soft touch and heat and cool, and they have different receptors are there. And once one of our colleagues asked that even on the tongue we have touch receptors. So does the taste receptor detect touch? Or the sensory receptor are all over the body, so even on the tongue we have that receptor, so what would be the difference? So the answer was yes. On the tongue there are touch receptors are there, but the taste receptor doesn't detect touch, and touch receptor doesn't detect the taste. So this is very clear to us, like the one receptor will not detect two different objects or completely different field. So then, as I said, all this sensory informations goes through the thalamus. I would like to go to the thalamus. In the thalamus, there are many nucleus, like interior nuclei. You can see, which is the science described mainly for learning, memory, and alertness. And then dorsal medial nucleus. It's a memory, integrate, and retrograde, and also limbic function. Then ventral, VA and VL, which is plan for movement, learning movement. And then VPL and VPM is facial sensation and body sensation. And then pulvinar, which is integrate visual, auditory, and somatic. And of course, LGN is lateral genicular body, and medial genicular bodies are visual and auditory, which is very clear. And in the thalamus, we found like many memory fields inside the thalamus. And in the thalamus, I found that there's a one nuclei they call house nuclei, which control the consciousness. So what does it mean, it controls consciousness? And why olfactory information doesn't go through the thalamus? That's a one question. Is there any explanation through the evolutionary or something else? And in the thalamus, as you can see, there are involved many mental activities that they're like learning and planning. And other hand, like memory, as we have seen the many part of the thalamus there relay on the memory, and of course hippocampus. And then many of this association area of the brain, like visual association area and auditory association area, they've been talking these part of the memory brains. Of course, in the Buddhism, the memory is a very important mental factor, which is included in determining mental factor. And so here, I don't know, what is this area, the brain area, is it really memory? Or maybe it's not really memory, but related to the memory. And maybe some other mental factors could be possible. And why they think these are memory, there are many questions could be rises. So this is just an overall picture of the pathway to the thalamus and from the thalamus. So the question, as I said, except olfactory, why rest of the sensory signal travel through the thalamus? Why not olfactory? What would be the mental state when signal arriving to the thalamus and on the way to the thalamus? Does occipital cortex has a capacity to recognize or describe the object? And so do the other auditory and somatic sensory as well. So now we move to the object and subject. And of course, when we say object and subject, all the phenomena are included in these two words. Or even you can include everything in the object, which is, which in we call yul, means the perceivable, right? Something like that. So anyway, we distinguish that in three different categories, like object of apprehension, appearing object, referent object, or conceive object, determined object, whatever you call. And on the subject of direct perception and conceptual for the object of apprehension. And then appearing object, every consciousness level has appearing object. Now, third one is only conceptual, but not the direct perception. In Tibetan, we call Nangyu Shabakula Yeshinyu Toba Gerje, means the third level of the object is only that conceptual level can perceive. So then, what does it mean, the direct perception and conceptual? Direct perception is an awareness which is non-mistaken and free from conceptual and produced from its own uncommon dominant condition, which is a physical. It's mainly for the sensory direct perception, not the sixth sense. And direct perception always comes to the affirming perception. I think once when in a workshop we heard that when we look outside, to the eye we receive, say like many informations. But then to our mental level, only 5% of this goes to the mental level. Rest of them, we don't really know it. And which can be, I think practically we can prove it when I look this way. And to my retina, of course, whole of this information goes to my retina. But of course, even 1 or 2% can be sent to my mental states. That is very obvious. So even in the Buddhism, it says the direct perception is always goes to the object with, how do you call, objectly, or nguvangi we use call, or dumju. Not like separating the object. And then conception level, determinative knower that apprehend through the thinking, thought, and name, I think. So that we call eliminative engager, or subjective consciousness which engage its object, differentiating it into its separate part. So maybe this is one thing that at the flower, your direct perception can looking directly, but thought is coming through your imagination. So here is a real picture of the brain. I just want to ask my Buddhist colleagues to see this side when you are looking at the object. The upper part is a frontal lobe, and the lower part is the visual cortex. So these two slides are when you are looking at something, but then other two slides are not looking at it, but thinking after you look at it. So you can see the difference between when you are looking at it and when you are thinking on it. So here we don't see much differences on the frontal lobe, both when you are looking at it and thinking at it. But at the visual cortex, you can see very clear when you are looking at it, the visual cortex, many places are activating, but when you are thinking, there are very few places are activating. So from here, you can get some information. So after that, when we come to the mental factor, in Buddhism, we speak about many mental factors. I don't think that all the mental factors are included in this, but they selective mental factors which are more important things. Even in texts, if we try to find out each mental factor, it would be countless. But then we are trying to find out a mental factor which has completely separate function. or responsible maybe. So here 5 omnipresent mental factor, 5 determining, 11 virtues, 6 root affections, 20 secondary affections, and 4 changeable. It's according to the Abhidharma Samuchaya, but in Abhidharma Kosha it talks about only 46 mental factors, and also there are some other texts which talks about 72 mental factors, and there are many different numbers of mental factor they're described. But sometimes, conceptually, there are not really differences, but when they count them, it's a little different. When you go into deeper, then you don't see much contradiction on this. But now I'm not going to talk very detailed about this mental factor. Even I'm not really completely aware of these. And so mainly we will focus on the 5 omnipresent mental factors, which we call, like first, feeling. In Tibetan Sorwa, sometimes the feeling Sorwa doesn't make exactly the same, but in general, the feeling, the Sorwa is an omnipresent mental factor. Whatever, any mental state arises in your brain or your mind, at the same time there would be a feeling. It doesn't matter whether it's unpleasant or pleasant or neutral. The same as that way, the recognition or perception they call Geshe. This is as last 2 days and Geshe, and they've given you the differences of the mind and mental factor. So it makes me much easier. So Geshe, the samjana, recognition, is a kind of mental factor which separate, like this is white, this is blue, and this is this, like recognizing. And then another explanation, this is some is a very well, it says very well analyze the quality of the object, each and into the whole object, I think. And then samba, it's a mental impulse which push your primary mind closer to the object. And yela chepa, attention, and it's make sure or very often pushing toward the object. And then lastly, rekpa, it's a touch or contact. It's also usually, it says object, organ, consciousness, and touch and analyzer, mental phenomena. Collection of the object, organ, and consciousness, and touching and analyzing the mental phenomena, the rekpa. When we try to find out each and every function and the entity, then sometimes we feel difficulty, sorry. So now I'm going to the sixth sense. Is there a sixth sense? If so, then how do we define? So here, Madhyamika, the Chandrakirti says, because in the dream, when we are sleeping, we don't have the all the sensory consciousness doesn't function. So at that point, only the sixth sense is functioning. And in Buddhas, even there are two which knows the visual image, sukshapani nambani, which says that is one eye consciousness and another one is mental. And then the non-Buddhist philosophers argue, if there is a sixth sense, so what would be the object of this sixth sense? Is the object that five senses already perceived, or it's a different? So answer of that, even the sixth sense has a three conditions: object condition, and dominant condition, and immediate preceding conditions. From this, when they explain about these three conditions of the mental phenomena, then it could answer that blind cannot see the physical phenomena, and even the mental sixth sense is not going to be the contradict with the others. And another thing is that there are in overall in the existence, there are one phenomena which is categorized into the mental phenomena, and another one is other than the mental phenomena. So the one which perceives mental phenomena, it's a self-seeing, rangrik, and according to the others, there are sensory perceptions and mental perceptions, and another one we call yogic nenjormusum, the yogic perception. Why I take this yogic perception, yogic direct perception, this is a mental state which is arised or dependent upon the meditation, stabilization, union of the vipassana and shamatha. I think this can prove that consciousness or mental development is infinite. So that's why I just took that. And these are the three conditions of the mentals. So how we arise the sixth sense, according to that, there are many different ways of explaining, like Pema Kewa, alternating production, and production of three types, Dosumba Kewa, and production of end of the continuum. So these are the very, I think it's a little complicated, but the production of three types is mainly named by Choje Sabe and then Kitur Rinpoche, and they accepted this. But the first Dalai Lama, Gyawa Gemde Dup, he opposed, and he didn't accept that. And his way of thinking is product of end of the continuum. First, sensory direct perception continues, and then finally one mental direct perception arises. So here are some of the modern science talking about the sixth sense. It's an extrasensory perception evolved in reception of information not gained through the recognized physical sense, but sensed with the mind. And what are the sixth sense? And here they've been doing this experiment, found a gene for the sixth sense in human, but it is muted and cannot be detected chemical message. And here I think this is a little important. In Buddhism, they always describe seven awareness. To understand the reality, the subjective is very important. At the same thing to the scientist. I found that they are taking very seriously on illusion. So why it happened? Because scientists, whenever they are doing experiment, the direct perception, or they are very important. Seeing things, especially the visual, is very important for them. So when they found there are the illusion in the vision, so it's to make sure doesn't disturb illusion to understand the reality. It comes from ancient Greek, Leonardo, also Galileo, Einstein, and looking at the 2-dimension, 3-dimension, stereoscopic vision. all this process has been taken seriously because it may affect to understand the reality. So going through this, finally they found that the reality as you see does not exist. And so then what is the reality? Thank you very much.